areas. But when we come into the professional environment, what are you seeing in terms of accountants managing their time or grappling with the issue? Is it the same as what you experienced all those years ago?
Yeah, absolutely, exactly the same. We all, if you like, grew up in the same, following the same pathway, and we spent time in Division 4, which is the production division. So that shapes the way we think. And Division 4 means that you're working in Quad A, and we'll talk about A, B, C, and D, or 1, 2, 3, 4 later on. But it keeps you working in Quad A, and when you leave from that Division 4 environment, because you're on the production line, if you like, and then you come out and run your business, then you run your business with the same mentality as you ran it when you were in Division 4 on the production line. So that's the reason for it, and every accountant goes through it. And unless you can break out of that and see the light, if you like me, and you took Dr. Stephen Covey to make me see the light, then you've got to be able to interpret that and then apply it to your practice, because often you might know the theory, but you don't know how to apply it in a business such as ours. Because Dr. Stephen Covey talks about the theory, but often the how was missing, and it's up to you to interpret it. So absolutely, we all went down the same path, and that's why we all ended up in the same path, except for the few who've been able to get out of that situation.
Absolutely. So on that note, I think we should dive into the actual strategy that we're going to cover off today. There's many different time management strategies. There's many different ways people like to look at this topic, but this is one that's very close to you because it's one that has dramatically changed the way in which you operate. So take us back to the origins of you coming across Stephen Covey's quadrant. What sort of state you were in at the time, and how this affected you and the journey since?
Yeah, I mean, my practice was really, really small, and I was working like 100 hours a week. And then and I don't know, many of you will remember this, but BRW used to have a section where they used to interview a very successful accountant. And, I used to read that because that was in my field, talking about fellow accountants. And anyway, there was this particular story about a guy that I used to work with, side by side, and we worked for the same employer. And his business was 10 times the size of mine. And then, I found out that he worked a fraction of the time that I worked and I couldn't understand how he could do that. And then he put me onto the book, and then the quadrants and all that sort of came from there, because I was just looking. I was at a crossroads, and I was looking I was trying to find an answer to how I could get around this problem, because I was only 30 at the time, and I couldn't see myself sustaining another 2 years of the work I was doing, let alone another 30 years, because I was just in my early 30s. So he started me on this journey by recommending that I read the book. But the book is quite difficult to read. I had to read it several times because it's very, very, he uses a lot of deep psychology, and he doesn't use a lot of examples with your own business and your own practice. So a lot of it, then the interpretation of that is my own interpretation.
I see. So, Jamie, I'll cut to you for a second, because you'd read Stephen Covey's book as well over the years. And when Ed introduced this topic to you, when you're at a certain point in your journey, had you thought about your time management in this light before, or how were you considering your time at that stage?
Yeah, I hadn't considered it in terms of Dr. Stephen Covey's time management quadrant, and I think it goes back to what you said earlier, Brenton. Like, we're not educated in how to manage your own time, other than what you might do in your private life, or even if you go to university and you've got to manage your time and your schedule like that. So once I started working with Ed, it took me back to 1991 actually, when I first read Seven Habits, and it took me back then. But the difference with when I started working with Ed was how it applied to an accounting practice. You know, how it applied to a service firm, and then how it applied to myself and the leaders that I was trying to develop within my own firm. So I think the key is the theory is the one thing, but I'd want to emphasize what Ed said. It's about the practical, everyday application of the theory, and Ed, to his credit, worked that out. You know, how did it apply to Ed, and therefore how does it apply to all of us?